The Morrison family's white mansion, nestled in the upscale suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, Pennsylvania, was renowned as one of the most beautiful homes in the area. The well-maintained lawn, colorful flower beds, and seasonal decorations adorning the front entrance created the picture of a perfect family that seemed to have stepped right out of a magazine. At 7 o'clock in the morning, the sweet aroma of freshly made pancakes wafted from the kitchen as Rachel Morrison skillfully prepared breakfast. Known as one of the most successful real estate agents in town, she devoted all her energy to playing the role of the perfect stepmother at home. "Mama, thank you for another delicious breakfast today." 8-year-old Emma came running down the stairs, throwing her arms around Rachel with a beaming smile. With her blonde hair braided and wearing a pristine blue dress, she was the very picture of an adorable little girl. She was always an honor student at school, consistently won prizes at piano competitions, and was beloved by the neighborhood adults who called her their little angel. "Good morning, Emma. Pancakes again today. Would you like blueberries or maple syrup?" Rachel answered with a smile, but something nagged at her deep down. She thought she saw Emma's smile disappear for just an instant. However, seeing Emma immediately return to her usual angelic expression, she convinced herself it was just her imagination. "Both, please. Has Daddy already left for work?" Rachel nodded at Emma's question. Her husband Michael was a department manager at an IT company and had been particularly busy lately, often leaving for the office early in the morning. They had met at work, dated for 2 years, and then married, but Michael had Emma from his previous marriage to Jessica. Jessica had supposedly died by suicide 3 years ago due to postpartum depression, but Michael was reluctant to discuss the details. Emma sat at the dining table, politely placed her napkin on her lap, and skillfully used her fork and knife with her small hands to cut up her pancakes. Her mannerisms were remarkably sophisticated for an 8-year-old, showing a composure that seemed almost adult-like. "I have a math test today. I'm sure I'll get a perfect score." At Emma's confident words, Rachel offered encouragement, saying, "Good luck." But for some reason, at that moment, she thought she saw a cold light flash in the depths of Emma's eyes. Rachel shook her head, trying to banish such thoughts from her mind. "Mama, do you really love me?" Emma's sudden question made Rachel pause. The inquiry sounded innocent and childlike, yet felt somehow calculated. "Of course, Emma. You're my precious daughter." Emma smiled with satisfaction at Rachel's answer. However, the anxiety that something was hidden behind that smile continued to smolder in her chest. As Rachel watched Emma prepare for school, she was approached by their neighbor, Mrs. Hanson. "Rachel, your family really is ideal. Emma is so well-mannered too. I wish my grandchildren would follow her example." Receiving such envious glances from neighbors, Rachel always felt a sense of unease. Certainly, on the surface, they might appear to be the perfect family. However, the small anomalies she had begun to notice recently were casting a dark shadow over her heart. The previous week, when Michael was away on business, Rachel woke up in the middle of the night to find a small shadow standing in front of the bedroom door. It was Emma. She stood there silently, just staring. The moment Rachel was about to call out to her, Emma wordlessly returned to her own room. "Mama, it's lonely when Daddy isn't here." The next morning, as Emma ate breakfast as if nothing had happened, her murmured words filled Rachel with an inexplicable fear. Were these simply words expressing a child's loneliness, or did they carry some other meaning? She couldn't shake the feeling that adult-like calculation lurked behind Emma's innocent eyes. Rachel watched Emma's retreating figure as she headed to school through the window, trying to confront the anxiety swirling in her chest. In the second week of October, the gymnasium at Maplewood Elementary School was bustling with parents. The monthly PTA meeting was being held, and Rachel sat with the other mothers on wooden chairs. Principal Davis took the podium and began announcing this month's outstanding students. This month's model student is Emma Morrison. As applause rang out, Emma stood up bashfully. Seeing her, the surrounding parents smiled warmly. Her homeroom teacher, Ms. Miller, stepped forward and took the microphone. Emma is not only an excellent student but also takes good care of the other children. She's especially kind to new transfer students and classmates who are struggling, treating them like a little teacher with such gentleness. Ms. Miller's words filled Rachel with pride. However, at the same time, a small question arose in her mind. When had Emma become so caring toward other children? After the meeting, Caroline Wilson, the mother of one of Emma's classmates, approached Rachel. Her daughter Sophie was a shy girl in the same class as Emma. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm so grateful that Emma has become friends with Sophie. Sophie is introverted and had trouble making friends, which worried me, but since Emma started kindly reaching out to her, she seems to enjoy going to school." Rachel smiled in response to Caroline's grateful words. However, her subsequent words stuck in Rachel's chest like a small thorn. "Emma is really thoughtful, isn't she? She even remembers Sophie's allergies and warns her, peanuts are dangerous, so be careful. She's like a little doctor." Rachel maintained her smile while feeling uneasy inside. It was true that Emma knew about Sophie's peanut allergy, but where had she learned about it? That doubt became reality the following Friday. An emergency call came from the school saying that Sophie had suffered a severe allergic reaction during lunch and had been taken to the hospital by ambulance. Fortunately, the EpiPen was administered quickly and her life wasn't in danger, but the cause was unknown. Poor Sophie. At dinner that day, Emma murmured with a worried expression. When Michael asked, "Was she okay?" Emma nodded slightly. Yes, but she looked like she was suffering terribly. Sophie can't eat peanuts, so she must have accidentally eaten something wrong. As Rachel listened to Emma's words, she recalled a memory from the previous week. When picking up Emma from school, she thought she had seen Emma reaching toward Sophie's lunchbox. She hadn't thought anything of it at the time, but looking back now, it seemed unnatural. Over the weekend, Charlie, the hamster Emma treasured, suddenly died. Saturday morning, Emma came running into the living room crying. Charlie died. He was fine just yesterday. Seeing Emma's tears, Michael hurried to comfort her. It's okay, Charlie is surely living happily in heaven, he said while hugging his daughter. Rachel also helped comfort Emma, but there was something theatrical about the way Emma cried. She couldn't tell whether the sadness was genuine or if Emma was simply displaying the expected reaction. That afternoon, when Rachel was cleaning out the kitchen trash, she found a small transparent wrapper. It was packaging for a syringe, the small kind used by veterinarians. Rachel wondered why such a thing was in the trash. When she asked Michael, he only answered that he didn't know. It must have been left in a pocket from when we took Charlie to the hospital last time. Michael's explanation sounded reasonable, but Rachel's anxiety didn't disappear. The last time they had taken Charlie to the hospital was 3 months ago, so why would the packaging turn up now? Monday night, Rachel resolved to confide her anxieties to Michael. The two faced each other in the bedroom, and Rachel carefully chose her words. Lately, I've been concerned about Emma. Small things, but I've been feeling uneasy somehow. Michael looked at Rachel with a tired expression. What kind of things? Rachel told him about Sophie's allergic reaction, Charlie's sudden death, and Emma standing in front of the door in the middle of the night. However, Michael's reaction was cold. Maybe you're just feeling distant from Emma because you're not her biological parent. Emma is a perfect child. Her grades are good, and everyone loves her. Your worries are unfounded. Michael's words pierced deep into Rachel's heart. It was true that she was a stepmother with no blood connection. But that didn't mean the anxieties she was feeling were meaningless. If you're really that worried, why don't you get some counseling? You might be under stress. Michael's suggestion further isolated Rachel. Unable to gain understanding from her husband and beginning to doubt her own instincts, she continued to worry alone that night. Tuesday night, as Rachel was reading a book in the living room, Emma came down the stairs in her pajamas. Looking at the clock, it was after 10 o'clock. "Mama, I wanted some water." Emma approached with an innocent smile. When Rachel went to the kitchen to fill a glass with water and handed it to her, Emma suddenly asked a question while receiving it. "Mama, do you hate me?" The question was so sudden and seemed to be asked with such calculated timing. Rachel answered in surprise. "Why would you ask such a thing? Of course I love you." Emma smiled with satisfaction and murmured, "That's good." However, it felt like some other emotion was hidden behind that smile. It was as if she were testing Rachel's reaction, with a cold calculation that could be sensed. "Good night, Mama." As Rachel watched Emma's retreating figure climbing the stairs, she was enveloped in deep anxiety. On the last Monday of October, Rachel woke up at exactly 7 o'clock. Outside was still dim, and the cold autumn air fogged the window glass. Michael had already left for an early morning meeting, and in the house wrapped in silence, Rachel began preparing breakfast as usual. While mixing pancake batter in the kitchen and reflecting on recent events, the light sound of footsteps running down the stairs echoed, and Emma appeared in the kitchen, drawn by the smell of breakfast. Dressed in her usual neat clothing with her blonde hair carefully braided, she radiated the charm of someone who had stepped out of a picture book. "Good morning, Mama. Today in art class, we're making Mother's Day presents." At Emma's innocent words, Rachel's hand stopped for a moment. Her heart began beating with an unnatural rhythm. It was the end of October now, Mother's Day was in May. Why was Emma talking about something so out of season? "Mother's Day is in May, Emma," Rachel answered, trying to maintain her composure. Emma's expression froze for an instant, but she immediately showed an embarrassed smile. "Oh, that's right. I made a mistake. We're making Thanksgiving decorations." At that moment, Rachel definitely saw a cold light dwelling in the depths of Emma's eyes. A calculated mistake, performed embarrassment. The reaction was far too unnatural for an 8-year-old child. However, Emma immediately returned to her usual angelic expression and began eating her pancakes with apparent enjoyment. When breakfast was over and it was time to prepare for school, Emma shouldered her backpack and picked up her lunchbox, but suddenly grimaced and clutched her abdomen. "Mama, my stomach hurts." Emma's complaint was sudden, and she seemed to be in more severe pain than Rachel had ever seen. She was sweating on her forehead, her face was pale, and it looked like genuine abdominal pain. "Should you stay home from school?" Emma shook her head at Rachel's suggestion. "No, I want to go to the hospital. It really hurts." Emma's pain seemed real, so Rachel reluctantly decided to head to the hospital. Even while getting into the car, Emma continued to clutch her abdomen, looking distressed. However, once the car began moving, she started gazing out the window with an expression as if she were calculating something. At each traffic light, she seemed to be observing her surroundings and checking the road conditions. "Mama, the hospital parking lot is big, isn't it?" Rachel tilted her head at Emma's sudden question. Why would a child supposedly suffering from abdominal pain be concerned about the parking lot? "Yes, I suppose it's fairly large." "Is it near a road with lots of traffic?" Emma's second question was even more puzzling. Why would someone suffering from pain ask about traffic conditions? While driving, Rachel observed Emma's expression through the rearview mirror. She did grimace occasionally, but the calm observational eye she showed in between was not that of an 8-year-old child. When they arrived at the parking lot of St. Mary's Hospital, Emma's abdominal pain mysteriously began to subside. By the time they got out of the car, she had returned to almost normal condition. "I think I'm okay after all." I started feeling better riding in the car. Rachel was confused by Emma's quick recovery. However, deciding to have her examined just in case, she locked the car. At that moment, Emma suddenly shouted loudly, "Oh! My precious stuffed animal fell on the road." Emma was pointing at the roadway in front of the hospital, but Rachel couldn't see anything. There was no stuffed animal lying on the road. On the asphalt surface, the morning rush hour traffic was passing by continuously without interruption. "Emma, there's nothing there." The moment Rachel said that, Emma suddenly ran toward the roadway. Her movement was too quick for a child who had been suffering from abdominal pain, and it seemed calculated. Rachel frantically shouted, "Emma, that's dangerous," but it was already too late. Emma stopped at the edge of the roadway and made a gesture as if checking left and right. The first car passed by. The second car also passed. The third did the same. Then, when the fourth car, a blue sedan, approached, Emma unhesitatingly jumped into the roadway. A piercing screech of sudden brakes rang out. The driver desperately tried to turn the steering wheel, but it was too late. With a dull collision sound, Emma's small body flew through the air and fell onto the road. "Emma!" Rachel's scream shattered the morning silence. She tried to rush over, but her legs froze and she couldn't move. That was because there was something she had seen just before Emma jumped out. It was the calm, calculated expression of someone about to execute a plan. As the ambulance siren wailed, Rachel gripped her trembling cell phone. While police officers and paramedics moved about frantically, she hid alone behind a car, trying to confront this terrible truth. 30 minutes later, Rachel was in her living room at home. As if nothing had happened, she was drinking coffee in the silence-wrapped house. Then her cell phone rang. It was Michael. "Rachel." "Emma." Emma was hit by a car. Michael's voice was distraught and tearful. "She's in critical condition and unconscious. She's at St. Mary's Hospital. The doctor says there might be brain damage." On the other end of the phone, Michael was sobbing. "Please, come right away. The doctor says she might not make it through the night. Emma. Emma might die." Rachel gazed out the window and quietly took a deep breath. The autumn afternoon sunlight was turning the fallen leaves in the yard golden. "I'm not going." "What are you saying?" "Emma might die. You're Emma's mother." Michael's scream echoed through the phone. "I'm not going. Because she..." Rachel's words stopped halfway. Michael continued shouting on the other end of the phone, but his voice no longer reached her ears. She quietly hung up and sank deeply into the sofa. After hanging up on Michael, Rachel slowly made coffee in the silence-wrapped living room. Her hands weren't shaking. Rather, she felt a strange sense of relief now that the anxiety that had been swirling in her chest for so long had finally become reality. On the dining table, 3 thick files were neatly arranged. These were the evidence Rachel had secretly collected over the past year. Opening the first file, she found copies of notebooks filled with handwritten text. These were Emma's planning notebooks that she had been writing in her room. The cover had the title, "My Special Plans," written in cute letters, but the contents were spine-chillingly terrifying. The first page had the heading, "How to Make Babysitter Kate Fall Down the Stairs," with detailed plans written out complete with illustrations. Methods for stringing transparent thread at specific positions on the stairs, calculations of the exact times Kate would pass through, and even the procedures for acting to make it look like an accident, all too meticulous for an 8-year-old child to have conceived. The next page contained plans using Sophie's allergies. Emma had researched methods for putting peanut powder in Sophie's lunchbox and had even calculated how much would cause suffering without being fatal. "If she dies, it won't be fun. I want to watch her suffer," was written innocently in childish handwriting. And on the most recent page was the terrifying title, "The Perfect Method to Eliminate the New Mama." Along with the subtitle, "Gain Sympathy Through a Car Accident and Make Rachel the Villain," the exact events of this morning were planned out in detail. The reasoning for selecting the hospital location, methods for acting out abdominal pain, and the procedures for jumping into the roadway at the most effective timing, everything was meticulously calculated. The doorbell rang. Rachel stood up and headed to the front door. Through the door, she could see a woman's figure. Dr. Sarah Sullivan, a specialist with 20 years of experience as a child psychiatrist. "Rachel, are you ready?" Dr. Sullivan asked in a calm voice. In fact, she and Rachel had been secretly cooperating for a year. They had been recording and analyzing Emma's abnormal behavior patterns, collecting evidence in preparation for this day. "Yes, everything is prepared." The two sat in the living room, and Dr. Sullivan began reviewing the files. "That child has textbook-level antisocial personality disorder. Cases with such advanced manipulative abilities and planning skills at age 8 are extremely rare." Dr. Sullivan's voice contained both professional calm and deep concern. "But to this extent at age 8. I've been in this field for nearly 30 years, but I've never seen a child who could manipulate emotions as perfectly as Emma." Then Dr. Sullivan confessed the most shocking fact. "Rachel, there's something I need to tell you. I investigated the former wife Jessica's medical records. What she pulled out was a copy of official hospital records. Jessica was supposedly a suicide due to postpartum depression, but that's not actually true. She continued receiving psychiatric treatment. The reason was complaints that she was being mentally cornered by her daughter." Rachel gasped. The medical records contain detailed documentation of Jessica's desperate situation. Complaints like, "My daughter is trying to kill me, something is being mixed into my food, and she stands by my bedside at night staring at me," had been dismissed by doctors as delusions caused by postpartum depression. In the final consultation record, it says, "I've reached my limit. The only way to escape from my daughter is to die." Jessica didn't commit suicide, she chose death to escape from Emma. At that moment, the front doorbell rang again. This time it was the police. Rachel took a deep breath and opened the door. "Mrs. Morrison, could we ask you some questions?" Detective Davis and a young officer were standing there. Rachel invited them in and presented the evidence she had prepared. "First, please look at this." Rachel took out a tablet and played security camera footage from near the hospital. The video clearly showed Emma smiling while calculating the timing to jump into the roadway. The moment when she calmly let 3 cars pass and deliberately jumped out at the 4th was recorded. The officers' faces turned pale. "This is clearly premeditated," Detective Davis muttered in a trembling voice. He rewound the footage multiple times to check Emma's expression. There was not a trace of 8-year-old innocence, instead there was the calm, calculated expression of an adult criminal. "There's other evidence as well." Rachel stood up and, together with Dr. Sullivan, began explaining the truth behind past incidents. When police reinvestigated the suspicious death of the neighbor's cat, poison bait used to lure the cat was discovered in Emma's room. In the incident where babysitter Kate fell down the stairs, traces of transparent thread rigged on the stairs were found. And in classmate Sophie's allergic reaction incident, a spare EpiPen was discovered in Emma's locker. Everything was premeditated. Dr. Sullivan continued the explanation. Emma completely understood what results her actions would bring, yet took pleasure in harming others. Moreover, by being loved by those around her as the perfect child, she cleverly managed to avoid detection of her acts. At that moment, Rachel's cell phone rang. It was Michael. With trembling hands, she answered the phone to hear her husband's confused voice. "Rachel, is it true? The doctor says Emma has regained consciousness." But the first words Emma said were. Michael's voice was broken. "According to plan." An 8-year-old child said, "According to plan," from her hospital bed. And with a satisfied smile. From the other end of the phone, she could hear Michael sobbing. Emma asked the nurse, "Isn't the new mama coming anymore?" She said it while saying, "I'll do better next time." Rachel quietly hung up the phone. Now that all the truth was revealed, she felt relief from the bottom of her heart for the first time. The time had finally come to be freed from the fear and loneliness she had carried for a year. The police immediately took Emma into custody and decided to conduct a psychiatric evaluation at a specialized facility. Given her age of 8, she wouldn't face criminal charges, but Dr. Sullivan judged that the possibility of social rehabilitation was extremely low. 3 months later, at a snow-covered Pennsylvania State Pediatric Psychiatric Facility, Emma Morrison was spending her days as a model patient. She read books in her white room, shed tears while speaking words of remorse during counseling sessions, and was evaluated by young medical residents as showing signs of recovery. However, on the last page of the diary that Emma had brought as a personal item, this was written in small, beautiful handwriting: "When I turn 18, I'll leave here and begin my real plan." This time more cleverly, more skillfully. When Michael came to visit, Emma asked him with an innocent smile, "Daddy, when is the new mama coming? I'll do better this time, so it'll be okay." Hearing those words, Michael broke down crying in the visiting room. He was finally beginning to accept the reality that what he had thought was his daughter was actually an unknowable monster. Meanwhile, Rachel had begun a new life in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon. Having completed divorce proceedings and abandoned the Morrison name to return to her maiden name Walker, she was studying child psychology at the local university. Freed from those terrifying days, she felt peace of mind for the first time. One day, a letter arrived from Dr. Sullivan. "Rachel, your courage has saved many future victims. Emma's case has attracted attention in academic circles and is contributing to the creation of new diagnostic criteria for early detection. If you're willing, would you cooperate with a research project to detect children like Emma early? Your experience would be valuable material for saving other families." Rachel gazed at the peaceful townscape spreading outside her window and thought deeply. If that terrifying experience could be useful to other people, it might be meaningful. She sat at her desk and began writing a reply to Dr. Sullivan. At the State Pediatric Psychiatric Facility, Emma was smiling kindly at a newly assigned young female psychologist. Miss Johnson was beginning to be captivated by Emma's angelic appearance and intelligent conversation. "Emma, you're really such a smart child. I'm sure you'll get better soon and return to normal life." At Miss Johnson's words, Emma blushed bashfully. "Thank you, teacher. Having someone as kind as you nearby makes me feel very safe." That night, Emma added a new page to her diary. Operation Miss Johnson begins. Win her over and secure means of external communication. 10 more years until I'm 18. Let's prepare carefully. On a quiet Oregon night, Rachel was absorbed in reading child psychology books at the university library. Turning the pages, she reflected on her own experience. Family isn't built on blood relations alone. The courage to face the truth and sometimes make painful choices to protect loved ones is what creates real family bonds. She had tried to love Emma as a daughter. However, loving isn't always right. Sometimes protecting the people around you is more important than loving feelings. Real family consists of people who can protect each other, and that can be built even without blood connections. Rachel closed her book and looked up at the starry sky outside the window. So that children like Emma could be detected early and receive appropriate treatment before new victims were created somewhere. And so that stepmothers and adoptive mothers in situations like her own wouldn't suffer in loneliness without being able to ask for help. That was her answer, derived from that nightmare-like experience. The truth will always come to light eventually. And only those with the courage to face the truth can obtain real peace. In the distant Pennsylvania facility, Emma was gazing at the ceiling and smiling. There was still plenty of time. The next plan would be even more perfect.